Welcome to the Cutting Edge with Dr. Lee Pierson and Dr. Robert Stubblefield and special guest, Dr. Harry Binswanger. And today the title of the show is Affordances and Perceptual Inerrancy. And this is a heavy lift. So I'm going to turn this over to Lee, and he's going to give us some preliminaries.
Start lifting, huh? Okay, first of all, it is very likely that we will not we will certainly not finish our discussion this time. We'll probably very likely go over to the next time, and as well in addition to today, and we will probably do our discussion of affordances at that time, because I think perception is the more basic discussion of perception, and perceptual inerrancy really should come first. And I think that's going to take us this session. And then at the end of the session, we will have a clubhouse. I'm not sure if Dr. Binswanger, he gets hungry.
Yeah, I have dinner.
He may or may not. But you can, if you want, you can show up later to clubhouse, or whenever you can show up or not show up. It's okay. We're going to have a clubhouse discussion starting at 7 this time. So I wanted to start with a little bit about what is perception. It turns out that perception is rather difficult to define, or I think so anyway. Maybe Dr. Binswanger found it easy. I don't know. I find it difficult. I find it hard to define without resorting to terms, specialized terminology that I learned from my mentor, James J. Gibson, in grad school, and that would not be appropriate, I think, to start off with that. But we do have an article, a nice article by Robert Efron, who was a neurophysicist, biophysicist, but specialized in the psychology of perception, really, and was associated with Ayn Rand back in the 60s, anyway, or if not earlier. And he wrote this article called "What is Perception?" Which is a pretty good article, actually, and has a definition that we can at least use as a starting point here. I'm not going to try to summarize the article, but he says, Dr. Efron says, we can define perception as the direct, immediate awareness of discriminated existence, that's with the T, that's things that exist, existence, which results from patterns of energy absorption by groups of receptors. Now, I like the discriminated existence. Well, that's another word. I think that's another word for entities, maybe entities and their attributes. Harry says no. Or he nods. I don't know. It's something like that. But I think that what he means is isolated. That we can, in perception, we isolate a tree from a rock, from a dog, and so on. We don't see them as all one big blob. And patterns of energy absorption by groups of receptors. Well, the light or sound impinge on the receptors and cause responses. Now, I find that slightly too passive. I think in my definition, I would want to make it something a little more active than that. And I'm going to explain that more in a minute. But as a starting point, I think we can use that as a starting point. But let's take an example of perception. Of course, we all are perceivers, even if some of us are blind, we still perceive somehow. Even Helen Keller had some senses. And mostly we're familiar with vision, but I think to look at a tactile example will be revealing, or to look at a form of what James Gibson called haptic perception, active touch. So here's a little example, and you can even try this at home if you want to. So here's a rather unusual pen. They don't make these anymore. This is a Tombow egg. It's a short but fat pen. And if you do this, it's best to close your eyes, I think. So you close your eyes and start and feel the pin on your hand. If you just drop it on your hand, you don't get much of a sense of what the pin is. If somebody even rolls it for you on your hand, you don't get a very good sense, as good a sense. But if you do what Bob's doing, start rolling it around between and palpating it with your fingers and feeling it here and at this end and that end, pretty soon you build up over time. You build up a perceptual awareness of the nature of this object. If you perceive the object, not instantaneously, but over time, and if you're a really good introspector, those of you who are really good introspectors out there, will be able to distinguish two streams of consciousness involved here, two different, as one psychologist put it, David Katz, two different poles of experience, and a subjective pole and an objective pole. And here, the objective pole of experience, which is usually in the foreground, usually the one we pay attention to, is the perception of the object. You feel, it's a pen and it has some planar surfaces here, and it gets sharp here, and it's metallic here. It's different over here than this. So you build up this perceptual grasp, understanding, cognition, whatever you want to call it, of the pen. At the same time, you can pay attention, as say if you're a good introspector, to the other stream, which is how it feels on your skin, the feeling of it on your skin. How it, if you press it hard, it makes a hard indent. If you don't press it hard, if you push the point in, you feel a little pointy sensation. So these are the sensory qualities that you can feel. You can feel the sensory qualities if you take the introspective attitude. It's a little tricky because normally our usual perspective is to look at the world. So that's the default. But you can take this introspective point of view and basically abstract, because introspection is, in my view, abstraction plus conceptual identification. You can kind of abstract away from the object and just pay attention to the feel. And that's the sensory qualities. So there are two poles of experience, and they're kind of running, the streams of consciousness that are running in parallel, really. They're not the same. And there's no particular reason to think that one is turned into the other, by the way. And there are many, many patterns of sensational sensory qualities that can be associated with the same perception. I can roll the pencil pen here. I can roll it over between here. I can do it over here. I can, feel up here and then feel there. I can do all kinds of different ways of obtaining the stimulation. All of them lead to the same perception of the pen. So you see, the basic point I want to make is that perception is not just a passive reception of stimuli, but it's an active seeking of information. At least in many cases, it's an active seeking of information, and it doesn't occur instantly. It occurs over some time period, depending on what. And this is also true in vision, but I think it's made more obvious. Another thing I can detect the weight of it, but it helps a lot if I heft it. If I do some, actually heft it like this, bounce it around. That makes it much easier for me to get some notion of some idea of the weight. Okay, so movement. Movement is important in perception. If you just sit around and open your eyes, yeah, you see something. But if you really want to perceive the world, you've got to move around it. If you want to see the backside of an object, if you're just sitting around, you'll see the front. You got to move around to the back to see the backsides. Movement is very important in perception, clearly in this haptic arena, but also in vision as well. More movement, whether that movement be automatic or intentional, obtains more information. Okay, so why are mistakes made at cognition at this level? Why do we make mistakes? One would think that if your pickup of information for perceiving the pen was insufficient, if you didn't quite palpate it enough to really perceive it, and all the aspects you want to, you simply would not perceive the object in its fullness. You'd perceive it somewhat incompletely. And of course, I guess we always perceive things incompletely because you don't pick up all the information. And that's not an error. To perceive something incompletely, to not perceive all of it, that is not an error. Yet people make errors. So how does that happen? Well, I have something I want to say about that, but let me turn it over before I do. Let me turn it over to Dr. Binswanger and ask him if he would say something about the nature of perceptual inerrancy. What is it about perception that we can say is inerrant, well, there are other words for it, but let me just turn it over to you. See what you want to say, Harry.
Thank you. reason that it's inerrant, meaning it cannot make a mistake, is that it doesn't make judgments. It simply presents you with reality in a certain form. But first, I'd like to give my definition for my book, How We Know, of
by the way,
perception. Hard one.
May I just interject here, Harry? If I may interject, if you haven't read How We Know yet, you should. Just read it as soon as possible. If you're interested in any issues of epistemology, there's Steve's book. Well, here, I got mine too, and you should all have yours. Okay, I'll back to you.
Thank you. My hard-won definition is close to yours, or Efron's and yours. Perception is the direct awareness of reality in the form of spatially arrayed entities that result from the automatic neural processing of actively acquired sensory inputs. And in parenthesis, it is taken as understood that the awareness is ongoing, not momentary or episodic, and the perception, well, the next part is the inerrancy part. So the thing that's added there to the discussion is spatial array. And I came to the conclusion that that is what makes for the perceptual level, that the information is given to you in a spatial array. Hearing is that way, touch is that way, smell is not really that way, and hence I don't think it's a full perceptual modality. Taste is not given to you. You don't taste, well, it's sour on the left and then goes to sweet on the right when you eat sweet and sour pork. But perception differentiates and discriminates them from each other by means of spatial presentation. So I think that is really essential to it. And I also agree with the Gibsonian emphasis on direct awareness, the Lee emphasis on of reality, the Ayn Rand emphasis on entities, and I'll explain why existence won't do it. And I think you do have to put in something of the, with the Gibson emphasis on actively acquired. It's an achievement, he says, and that's brilliant. The perception is an achievement. I put in automatic neural processing because I think you have to say something about the physical means of perception. It is physically initiated, even though it's not just, and it's not essentially about what happens in the neurons. Now, what did I say? Oh, yeah, the existence. Existence covers entities, actions, relations, and all those other good categories. But just look at entity, action, attribute, and relation. So you can discriminate the motion of one thing from the motion of another. The motion of the leaves in the wind from the motion of the clouds behind them in the sky. The motion of one hand or one car against the motion of another. But that's the discrimination of motions from each other is not perception. It presupposes entities. The same for attributes. Something that is got green and red on it. You can discriminate the two colors from each other by their location. That's not perception. That is an element of perception. So I applaud the direction that Robert Efron is going in, but I think entities, as Ayn Rand stresses, is the sine qua non of perception. Now that's for just, the setting out of what perception is. The inerrancy, meaning that cannot make a mistake, is due to the fact that it doesn't make a judgment. It doesn't come with words attached. So when you see the stick in water, that you say, well, it looks bent. No, it looks a certain way. You may decide to call that essentially similar to something that is bent. If so, you'll find that that's a mistake. It isn't essentially similar, because when you pull it out of order, you see that only the conditions of perception create the similarity. It's the similarities not in the shapes of the things, but in the condition of perception leading to two, and here's this dangerous how you formulate it, leading to something, I don't want to be representationalist, that leads to a confusion. But the actual experience, the scene, SCENE, is metaphysically given. It cannot be different than it is. It's guaranteed by the automatic causality of, which is not a static thing any more than your car is. The operation of the car, once you turn it on and you just let it run, is metaphysically given. It's inherent in the nature of the things. There's no alternative. You can't say, bad car, you should have more horsepower. You're not trying. I mean, I'm tempted to say that, but it's wrong. And the engine never makes a mistake, nor does any instrument ever make a mistake. It registers what it has to register. So the errors are not in the scene, in the experience. And the fact that a camera would photograph the same angle of the stick, the same way of, if you go back to that, shows there's nothing wrong with what's going on in you, unless you get to the conceptual level where you apply the concept bent to something that is essentially different from bent. It's an understandable error, but it's a misleading. The perception is sort of misleading if you don't know what's going on, because you think you're dealing with a bent stick. You think, but you're not. So inerrancy, the thing I want to say about inerrancy is that it's absolutely essential to cognition. If perception, basic perception, could be wrong, what standard would you use? God's revelation that it's wrong? If you use more perception to say that it's wrong, how do you know that those perceptions are not wrong and the original one was right? There's no standard higher than what you're presented with. And we'll get into that more as, but that is one other way I could put it. Perceptual awareness is awareness. There's no such thing as awareness of what isn't there. That's hallucination. If you're aware of what isn't there, you're not aware, you're hallucinating it. But to see something, that something must exist. So there's no such thing as perceiving wrongly. If you perceive as a windward, as they used to call it, it means I succeeded, I grasped, I registered, I achieved a registering of reality.
May I put in something here? A question about that is that last part. I like most of what you said, of course, but that last part has never been convincing to me, because it seems to be kind of a trick. Why couldn't you apply the same trick and say there's no such thing as conceiving wrongly, because conceiving is an achievement word? Well, if you make it an achievement word, it's an achievement word. So
well, that's true. I mean, if you do that, yeah, that's true. If you say
so, it's not the argument that it's an achievement word. Therefore, it seems to be circular. Seems to be circularity there.
Yeah, that's not
because you can apply the same thing to conceptual awareness, which of course is subject to error in a more direct sense.
But we have in the conceptual vocabulary words that indicate a neutral thing, such as a conclusion. Does not have to be a correct or incorrect conclusion. But a grasp
Yeah.
You have to have some concepts for the
True.
achievement.
Sure.
Okay.
You do, but you can't use that by definition to defend. It's a circular
No.
defense. Let me try this. Let me try
Guilty
this.
as charged.
Let me try this before and I'll leave it. This is not our main point here. But you say there's no such thing as awareness of what doesn't exist. Well, dialectical materialism doesn't exist.
No, it does. It's a theory.
Well, as an
We're the
idea,
theory.
as an idea. But
Yes.
that's a separate. That's a different thing from the alleged existent.
Yes.
Let's distinguish
Right.
those two things. Of
Or
course,
God.
it
It's
exists as an
simpler
or
when God.
many other
Yeah.
things. So there are awarenesses.
There's no
of
awareness of God.
Okay, you that's one possible way of doing it. I mean, but there's something in people's minds, and it's not a hallucination. So we need something else.
Yeah.
We need a term, because it's not a hallucination. Well, it could be for some people. I guess it is. God is a hallucination because they talk to him and hear him. But for those who do not do that and simply believe in him, it's not a hallucination, and there is something in their minds. And of course, it doesn't. But it's not an existence.
No.
So you have to have a. I'm just saying. Let me put it this way: we need a word for that condition, and that word would apply to certain things at the perceptual level as well. I think, or if we can come up with that word.
I hope not.
Imagination.
What, Bob?
Imagination.
Yeah, it's a rearrangement of elements from reality. Yeah.
Imagination, though, would normally refer to something that you create yourself, and you're creating it yourself, rather than that. Well, that's just what we do. When we imagine, if I say I imagined a monkey eating a banana on my front porch, I know he's not. There's no monkey on my front porch eating banana at this point. I know that when I imagine it. So imagination. I mean, people can get confused. That's true. They confuse what they imagine with what is. Normally, they confuse what they imagine with what is possible. I don't think they usually confuse what they imagine with what is actual, but they certainly do. The latter confusion is a favorite among philosophers.
What is faith? Faith is the belief that imagination is cognition by a different means. I know my faith is strong. I know there's a God. I know him through faith. That's
I'm not sure what. I'm not sure if imagination has to apply there, because some people they have faith in God even though they have no. They say, I have no idea what God actually looks like, because God is beyond all that.
Can I ask you a question, Lee?
Please.
You indicated that you believe there can be perceptual mistakes.
Well,
can you define what a mistake is, what a perceptual mistake is?
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't say that, but because I haven't defined. I think there are mistakes to use the objectivist term. A little. I don't really want to use this term, but we're talking about these things, this kind of consciousness stuff. We are so bereft of language. We don't have enough concepts. We have to do the best we can, and sometimes it's kind of stumbling. Anyway, there are mistakes at the perceptual level. There are things that animals do that are not to their benefit, but they do it anyway because for example, this is not a benefit example, but the Mueller-Lyer illusion, and we happen to have a picture of the Mueller-Lyer illusion available to us, right, Steve?
Yes, we do.
All right. If you want to put that up, I guess we can go ahead, because I'm going to make reference to it later anyway.
Yeah.
So there, and this is an illusion that humans see, but so do animals. There's this, it's very famous, this thing with little tails. And if you're like most people, you see this thing, the line at the top minus the tails looks like it's longer than the line at the bottom.
But you have to take away the verticals for it to. He's added in verticals.
I don't know what the verticals are doing there. Oh, the verticals are there to prove
to show that
true.
They're the same.
But you know
Can
what?
you take them away?
No, I don't think we can. But I don't know about you. For me, that doesn't make the slightest bit of difference to seeing the lines that the line at the top still looks longer, even though from the verticals I can judge them being the same, but that doesn't change it. That's one of the reasons why I don't think conceptual judgment has anything to do with this stuff. You can conceptually judge all day long that it's an illusion, and the illusion will still work. It doesn't change the fact that the lines look.
But there's no illusion. Yeah, what remains is once you take away the conceptual,
what's the illusion? The illusion. Yeah, the illusion is that the lines look different in length. That's the illusion. That's it.
Yeah,
that's what's meant by the illusion.
But
they still will look different.
But look what you're saying. It seems to me, from the way I see this scene, it seems to me that if I moved the bottom line up to overlap the top line, it would not reach the ends of that. So it's a prediction.
I actually didn't get that sophisticated. I just looked at it, and the top line looks long. Excuse me. Looks longer.
How did you learn the concept of length except by comparing two lengths to each other? You can't just say, it looks like it. You know.
See, this is good. I didn't use the concept of length. I just perceive that one thing, it's a perceptual level experience. One thing longer than another. You know, I have to use words to describe these things.
I know.
The confusion that comes about here is because when we talk about perceptual phenomena, we have to use words, but that doesn't mean that the words and the concepts are involved in our awareness. When we look at a scene and see one tree is taller than another, there's no conceptual judgment necessarily involved with that. You just see the one tree, you see the other one.
No,
one looks longer than the other.
No, you see a scene with trees. You don't see the height of the trees. That's an abstraction.
No, actually, I don't think it is. And, according to Gibson, we can't really bring in the invariance here. There's information in the structure of light to your eye that specifies, regardless of the visual angle, that specifies the height of a tree or a telephone pole. That's in the light. It's a structure. And if our visual system is sensitive to that, which we think it is, you see the height of a tree. Even though one tree subtends a different visual angle, you see them as equal in height, and an animal will see them as equal in height. It doesn't require any conceptual thought.
I don't know how you would ever decide an animal sees them as equal in height.
Oh, you can train them. You can train them to do this.
You can distinguish how they look. You can distinguish how they look, but it's not. An animal doesn't have. See, a conceptual judgment is trans-temporal. Conceptual judgment is not about this moment of experience. Leave aside that experience isn't, snapshots, but this 30 seconds of experience. A conceptual judgment says, if I were to go up to it and dangle a rope from the top of this tree, that rope would be longer than the rope dangled from the, it's all these kind of predictions. And the simplest one is, I know color is vexed, but this one's easy. You see distant hills and they look blue because of aerial perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You get up close, you think, gee, where'd the blue go? It's brown and green. There's no blue here. You back away, it's blue. So when you say it is blue, that's where the error is, because a conceptual judgment about the attribute of a thing tells you how it will look under all conditions of perception.
Well,
you tell you that.
You answered this by the first thing you said. It's a vexed example because color is especially in that kind of case, is a sensory quality.
Yeah.
It's more an aspect of form than it is of object. So the color example is not too good. The height example is good. The trees have a height, and you can see them. It's not a matter of time, even though I do want to remind people that perception is not instantaneous and does occur over time. But in that circumstance, you can see if I didn't draw this picture out for today because I thought we couldn't get into Gibsonian invariance, and so another time. But anyway, you can see two trees are the same height together. There's with them, they're together. If they're on a surface and you can detect the horizon,
They look
then
a
the amount of the
certain
tree,
way.
the
They
amount
look
of the
a certain
tree,
way.
yeah, and the amount of the tree that the ratio of the amount above to below horizon is an invariant for an object of a given height. So that gives a basis in the structure of light for seeing that two trees are equally high,
But you don't see
equally
that.
tall.
You
But I do.
only see the trees, the horizon. That's what's in the perception. The rest is learning and conceptual in this case. There's no
I think it is
sensory error.
because people will see that, will detect the equality of height of two trees. Say that these two trees are the
Quality
same
is a
height
concept.
without knowing anything. They don't have to know anything. They don't have to make any conceptual judgments. They don't have to know anything about the nature of the invariant, which is discovered by perception psychologists. It's just that the visual system is constructed in such a way, possibly with experience too. Of course, there is learning in that sense. It's constructed to be sensitive to that invariant, and there's no conceptual judgment. There's no conceptual judgment involved.
Got another question for you, Lee. Could you construct an experiment where, say, you train a dog to jump over things of a certain height? Can you make an illusion so that the dog would make a mistake in judging whether it can jump over a height?
Sure.
I couldn't, but somebody could do that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Oh,
because
absolutely.
dogs can make.
Does that
explain? You can train. No, this has been done. There have been plenty of experiments on dogs, parrots, chimps,
Kittens, infants.
I think fruit flies, although I'm a little dubious myself about the fruit fly one. But anyway, dogs and parrots and all kinds of animals, they train them up on the Mueller-Lyer illusion, and they get rewarded when they respond to the ones that are equal in length, and they make the mistake. They make the mistake that we all make. Well, it's been shown that they have the same illusion, but it's a little different. They experience it a little. Some of these experiments have been able to distinguish different extents to which the illusion, quantitatively different values of the illusion in different species. I don't know exactly how I can imagine how they do it, but anyway, it's been shown to work in animals. That's been shown to work. So yeah, you can produce an illusory. Well, you see, I'm not going to call him. Harry will right on top of me if I start calling them perceptual mistakes. They're mistakes at the perceptual level of some kind. They are some kind of mistake. And if perception is the achievement word, if that's the case, you can't call them perceptual mistakes, but you can't deny that the mistakes exist. They do exist.
Let's take a case that's easier that you called my attention to: the geese who land on the highway where it, because of a dip in heat refraction, it looks like water, but it isn't.
Yep.
Or a bird that flies. Well, a bird that flies in the window just doesn't perceive something, so that's not good. This one takes its experience to mean so and so. Let's take that. That's a good example. That's a mistake that occurs at the perceptual level. It is not a mistake in perceiving. It is a mistake in expectation, which is a word you don't like for some unknown reason, but perhaps you'll tell us. But the bird expects what, if you could put words to it, when I see that, I can land on it. It's going to be good, and it isn't. It's bad.
Yeah,
so I don't see that as any different from you give a dog a paper mache bone or something, a mechanical rabbit. So they take things they connect in their minds through perceptual associations, and on that level, association is the right word because there's no alternative. Through perceptual associations, they form certain expectations about what they'll see next, and those can be wrong. But it's not really wrong. They can't be wrong. They can result in goal failure. They fail to get the result they wanted. It's not even a mistake. You wouldn't say bad dog or whatever it is.
Well, not in that case. because because it's at night and there isn't anything the bird really is likely to be able to do easily to pick up more information. So that's what.
Oh, so that happens at night? The geese thing happens at night?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the case. It doesn't happen. I don't think it happens during the daytime.
I would think it does happen during the day, but you could.
Well, anyway, I don't know, but it's not easy.
Build a phony lake that the bird would land on, thinking it was a lake, and it would be its doom.
It would be a mistake, and then the question is it avoidable or not? Well, that's a matter of whether they were, how able were they to pick up more information. But it's still a mistake. It's still because it kills you. I mean, that's a
bad outcome. It's that their senses were their learning was inadequate to deal with that situation.
Yeah.
It does occur at the perceptual level. That I agree with you. That's correct.
Okay, so that at least we're not stuck in this idea that the explanation of error has to be conceptual judgment, which I think doesn't fly. It's simply scientifically false. It doesn't fly.
I had never thought about that. You make a good point. It's an error that occurs preconceptually, or it's a mismatch of something, a frustrated expectation that occurs at the perceptual level. It's not volitional, so there's no alternative to it. You think it is volitional, but even you don't in the sense in which we're now talking.
We're probably not. At least in some cases, yeah, right.
Yeah, because, it's pretty quick, and the issue of getting more information doesn't arise.
Yeah.
So, it's a bad thing to be categorized correctly following discussion. That happens before you get to the conceptual level. And children, preconception, because we don't know exactly when they get concepts, but the visual cliff, right? Didn't she take like below the
baby animals and baby humans, quite young, go right off the visual cliff. I mean, the visual cliff is like all scientific research. There are controversies around. There's been a whole line of research after the visual cliff, and there are all kinds of questions you can raise. But essentially, the finding is that at a very early age, baby animals, including baby human animals, won't go off that visual cliff. Even though, by the way, this is maybe a useful point here. Even though it's an illusion.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Cliff is not an actual drop off. There is a plastic, a transparent plastic overlay, and if they detected that, they wouldn't be so afraid to go off the thing.
Yeah, so if you have candy there, you have something they want on the plexiglass, and
usually
they won't go to it.
It's the mother on the other side usually.
Oh, okay. And they want to get to the mother, but they won't. They won't go across what looks like a big sharp drop.
Right.
And that's similar to the other quote mistakes. It's an error it's a bad outcome that occurs at the perceptual level. It's not conceptual.
No. Well, that's the standard explanation that you get in objectivist discussions, and I think that's just wrong. That just is.
You mean that it's always conceptual? Right.
I don't even think it's usually conceptual. I think it's generally not conceptual. It's just something it occurs because, well, I'll tell you, I haven't given me my explanation yet. Maybe we're at the point where I can start doing that. But we need to talk a little bit about, before we do that, I guess time runs by quickly when we're doing this stuff. Form of perception, which is an important concept in the objectivist approach here, but I think it needs to be thought through in light of a non-sensation-based theory of perception. Form of perception is, first of all, Ayn Rand does not in print, as far as I know, does not anywhere in published writings discuss form of perception. Harry may know better than I, but I think I got Shoshana over here, the ultimate authority, says no. I don't think it's anywhere in print in her published writings. It is in the transcript of the Nathaniel Brandon lecture
Oh,
series.
she wrote that lecture. So
Okay, but anyway, we don't have. It's not published. It's a transcript, and exactly, it's not. That is not an official source, but
Well,
it's in there. It is in there. It is in OPAR, Dr. Peikoff's book, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. It's in. It's in How We Know.
Wait. She does say it.
Okay.
In the appendix in the workshops. Now, she said, color is a form of perception.
That's not
Something caused by one existing phenomenon, blah, blah, blah.
That's not something she published.
No, but it's something she said.
Yeah. Okay. She said, right.
There's no question because Leonard.
Off the cuff. All I'm saying is we don't have her. We have her.
We don't have her setting it out as a doctrine.
Where she actually has thought and written something that she wants published and is there and was published as. We have that for a lot of things. We don't have it for this form of perception business. Nor do we have a lot of discussion anywhere. We have some discussion. I guess the longest discussion I can think of is in How We Know. It might be as long as anywhere.
I hope so.
In any case, so you should read that. But it's a tricky concept. In OPAR, I wrote this down somewhere. In OPAR, he says it's. Here's what I'll read you. This is from Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand, by Dr. Leonard Peikoff. It must be possible to distinguish between form and object, between the aspects of the perceived world that derive from our form of perception, such as colors, sounds, smells, and the aspects that belong to metaphysical reality itself, apart from us, whatever those happen to be. And by the way, we don't have a word for that. There's another thing where there's some trouble here. We have the distinction between intrinsic, objective, and subjective from Ayn Rand, which is very useful at the conceptual level. But none of those three things, none of those words applies to perception.
Right.
Perception is not subjective. Perception is not objective, which was actually at one time even Ayn Rand thought it was subjective, but she changed her mind. And perception is not intrinsic in the sense of that dichotomy. Mm-hmm. Intrinsic is kind of the closest thing there to it, but it's not really right because perception is not revealed to us in the way that faith is. So it doesn't fit any of those. We don't actually have a category for perception. We need one. I'll just throw that in. But anyway, form of perception are things such as colors, sounds, smells, sensory qualities. That's the phrase used in How We Know also. Mm-hmm. Sensory qualities. So from that standpoint, if that gives us a starting point at least, I'm proposing that many mistakes at the perceptual level, I don't know if all, because I was taught by J.J. Gibson that not all errors have the same cause that these kinds of errors. But anyway, as a starting point, I'm going to say that many errors, if not all, are errors of mistaking form for object, or introspection for extrospection, or you could say, or object for representation, but form is not really a representation. I mean, it's an error if you think of it as a representation, then it's an error. So it's that kind of. So you look at, for example, the bent stick. Steve, we've got a bent stick. I mean, a picture of a bent stick.
It's in How We Know. I've got some.
It's in How We Know.
Yeah.
It's in a million places, of course, because it's probably the favorite.
But not as good as in How We Know.
Oh no, of course not. Of course not. But I don't think Steve
what
has
I
that.
have is the.
You have this. Do you have a bent stick?
I don't.
Do you have a glass of water with a pencil? Well, Steve's still looking anyway.
I took the picture myself.
Okay.
Here we go.
You can hold it up there. You may beat Steve too.
Can I share my screen?
If you know how to do that, that treacherous act of sharing screen, do it, please.
Okay. Let me see if I got 73, 75. Yeah. All right. Share screen. Now, which screen do we want? Oh, I'm holding it up, so I don't need to share the screen.
You can do it that way.
That's
Just
it's
give us
not a
reality.
representation,
Why
it's reality.
put extra things in reality? Let's see now. That's kind of small for me. I can't see very well, but I
All
guess
right, let me
you can see that.
then. I haven't got the JPEG photo easily available. Here it is.
Yeah.
So this one is
Well,
the
I
bent
see it.
stick in water. I
Yeah.
don't know if you
Yeah.
can see.
Yeah. It's right there.
Let me try and get
It's
it.
the top. It's the yeah, that top picture, and you
And
can see.
my point is that the error isn't thinking if you pulled it out of order, what you would see is this, which is I made this by just dropping out all of the other things besides
Yes.
the pencil.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. I like that.
And you don't, because
Yeah.
out of order it looks straight.
Okay, but
Or it
in
looks
fact,
like
when
other
you have
strings.
this experience, the sensory quality does look bent. That's what it looks like. The look of it is it looks bent. It looks like it looks like what a bent stick looks like.
The stick looks like a bent stick looks like. Yes.
Like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I
But
don't know.
it doesn't.
This is getting better. Ooh, it went away.
Forms don't have a look. They are the look.
Well, okay, you can say that, but and I don't. That to me is just. I do understand what you're saying, but it is nevertheless the case that what you experience looks bent. It does look bent.
Yeah, it looks similar to the way a bent stick looks out of water.
And no amount of conceptual judgment one way or the other will change that. It will look bent, and it will always look bent forever. It's not caused by the bent look is not caused by a conceptual judgment. It's not eliminated by a conceptual judgment.
No,
it just
sensory
is.
form, the sensory
it just is.
The sensory form is metaphysically given.
Yes. Now, the way I would describe the error. Okay, here's from the Kindle version. It keeps going away. I touched the thing there, as a picture. Oops.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
Don't touch the screen.
All right. There's some more bent sticks.
Yeah,
a number of bent sticks.
Yeah, one of them's broken, and that's
well, they kind of look broken sometimes. Definitely.
Yeah.
So I say that the error here is mistaking the form, or shall we say the look of the form. Even that's probably not the right way of saying it.
No,
but the way the form, by the way it looks, the bentness, mistaking that bentness for the bentness of the object. Mistaking form for object.
But what does the bentness of the object mean? It means that it has a certain form of perception out of order.
No, it doesn't mean that. The bentness of the object is a feature inherent to the object. If an object is bent, that is a metaphysical fact about the object. It's got nothing to do with its form. Not a thing. It's bent because it's bent.
Shape is a form of perception.
What is?
Shape.
Oh, that's terrible. That is just, I know I saw that along with, is in OPAR, but that's terrible. Shape is a property of an object. An object is, it's a metaphysical property of an object.
So
just
is
like weight.
Color. In one context, you're talking about,
color isn't really. Color isn't.
I mean, all forms of awareness are an awareness of some fact about the entity. They're not.
It is an attribute. It's an attribute of the object.
No, it's no different. You got the primary secondary quality dichotomy.
No, I just don't believe in secondary qualities as being, attributes. The shape is not a secondary quality.
Yes,
John Lofton's.
According to Ayn Rand, it is, and
well, I don't know if John Locke
at peril.
It's an attribute like height. Height's an length of something. Weight. Those are all attributes, and I would say shape is an attribute as well. And by the way, you get the same shape. I'll prove it to you.
Okay.
You detect the same shape this way and this way and this way, even though the forms are different in all three of those cases. The forms are utterly different, but the shape is the same. So the shape is not the same as shape is not a form. Shape is not a form of perception.
Well, the term
form,
shape can be used either for that which gives rise to a certain form of perception or for the form of perception.
All right,
but
I'm going to use it to. I'm talking about the former.
Okay,
There is
then
an attribute
the
in the world.
color is in the thing. Then the apple really is red.
You know, with only 8 minutes
and the
left,
feather really is ticklish.
I don't want to talk about color.
Okay, we have a question from Shay Levy here.
Shay, okay, all right. Shay's got a question.
Okay, it's from one of the companion books on concepts, and I can't think of the title, but Shay has the acronym.
Yeah, it's a book on concepts. I know what that book.
Yeah, me too. And Greg Salamari has a lecture also. He's saying book and concepts of a companion. Yeah. All raise preconceptual errors. Objectivists know this. I'm not sure if I'm formulating what he wants. Salamari's epistemology.
Well, it sounds like I know Greg said something about that in a footnote somewhere about the errors not being conceptual, and that's right. I don't think he knows what the errors come from, what the nature of the error. I don't think so, but at least he does know that they're not based on conceptual judgment. That's what I remember. There's some footnote to that.
No, there is a small class of errors that are not based upon conceptual judgments, and they're not even errors. They're a small class of confusions, so I just say mistakings that are not mistakes, that are not due to conceptual judgment, because the organism isn't conceptual. But look, suppose...
I don't think it's a small class. I don't agree with that, of course.
Okay.
It's a large class of errors. There are lots of errors like that. Namely, all the things that animals and people do that are just at the perceptual level, where they don't sit there and start thinking about it and making a judgment. By the way, I don't even think, let me not go too far afield there with the conceptual judgment.
And thanks Shay for that super chat.
Yes. Okay, so he didn't have a question, is that right? He's just pointing out that there's
preconceptual errors that are referred to.
Okay. Yeah, okay. That's right.
Greg introduced the term post-perceptual processing, which I think is a really excellent term and a really excellent observation. Lee is also impressed with it. And it refers to the fact that there is preconceptual learning. I mean, animals learn, and that is not.
But there's also perceptual learning too.
Perceptual level learning, but perception.
No, you learn to perceive better.
There is adaptation. There is sensory adaptation.
You learned. Cornell had a whole course on this, which unfortunately, when I was a graduate student, unfortunately, that stopped just the semester before I got there. They had a course on perceptual learning, which was wine tasting. So the course you every week you drank different wines, and you got better at distinguishing the wines. Sure. And it wasn't conceptual learning; it was perceptual learning, and you learned to perceive better because you could make discriminations that you couldn't make before. You became sensitive to information in the light that you weren't sensitive before. And it's not any issue of post-perceptual processing. It's an issue of your perceptual system becoming more sensitive to invariance that it was not sensitive to before. So so if that's post-perceptual processing, everything that Gibson talks about is post-perceptual processing.
No, I think
if you want to do that, that's fine. But
increased sensitivity is not post-perceptual learning. Post-perceptual learning would be things like what you train a dog to do. It has to be entity related, but that's an interesting case where your senses, quote, sharpen, quote, due to the ability to make finer discriminations. Now, of course, that's aided by conceptual level, but I wouldn't be prepared yet to say you can't have it in animals.
I hope you
would. That would be an interesting thing.
Because you can't. Let me just push on a little further before pretty soon we're going to have to move over to Clubhouse. And let me again say that next time, 2 weeks, you can come 2 weeks from now. Is that right, Harry?
What day is that? What number?
What number is
37?
that?
I will check.
All right.
I'm willing to come. I'm willing to come. 6th of
But we
April.
want to have
Sounds
6th of April. 6th of
Yeah.
April.
Let's see.
Because we're not going to touch affordances. I'm not sure we're, everything always takes longer to talk about than you think, but by a lot. Anyway, I wanted to get this much in, that form, as I look at it, is as sensory qualities experienced briefly from one perspective. And that's why it causes trouble when you mistake form for object. So, example, the Ames room.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, do we have an Ames room?
Yes, we do.
All right. So the Ames room is a famous illusion. And the illusion is you got a little knothole, your peephole that you look through, and you look into this room and you see a gigantic Robert Stubblefield and a tiny Harry Binswanger. Even though, these are two other people, but even though, you see them, you might see them as being the same size when they're different, or different sized when they're the same, or something like that. And you see what happens is you have this room that is not like a normal room. It's not a rectangle. It is a, what do you call that? Trapezoidal. Trapezoidal, that three-dimensional trapezoidal shape.
I think so.
Anyway, so you have that, and that causes the illusion of one thing looking taller. The little girl will look much taller than that guy over on the right if you went through the peephole. However, as soon as you can open the door and movement is crucial to valid perception.
Yeah.
As soon as you can do that, that impression is completely destroyed, and you perceive the correct, I'm going to say validly, because that's Ayn Rand's word. You perceive validly that the guy over there on the right is taller than the girl. The problem is created by a momentary sensory impression. Momentary sensory impressions can be highly misleading, even to animals.
Right.
Yeah, misleading. Even to
Misleading
animals
is the word I go for.
Okay, misleading. So we'll call them misleading.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a conceptual error, and you eliminate the error by picking up information over time, and especially through movement. That's how you eliminate the error.
Now let me see if I gave in too quickly on something.
Yeah, you want to be careful.
What was your example of an error that's not conceptual? Forget the Muller liar, because that's
the bent stick is the same thing. The bent stick, you as a momentary impression. As soon as you can walk around the bent stick, it doesn't look like a bent stick.
That's right.
Or if that doesn't do it for you, you twirl it in the water, and you twirl it, and it doesn't look like it. It looks different.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't do it for you, you pull the stick out of the water, and it surely will not look like. So there are all kinds of movement things you can do to overcome the momentary sensory impression. And I think it's because form, as Gibson put it, sensation can obtrude on perception, or form can obtrude on. That's the word he used. Obtrude. It obtrudes. It gets into your awareness.
No.
And you focus on that.
But
and people do make that
I think
mistake.
I gave in too soon. That is a conceptual error. The error is when you apply the word. Stick is bent. I think you said it's preconceptual illusions, and that's not, that's very dubious. They're preconceptual setups where one thing looks like another thing because the conditions of perception are strange and you're not used to it.
It's not just that they're strange. It's that you have the momentary sensory. Okay, let me back up one step here, and then I guess we got to go to Clubhouse pretty soon. But and I think we got a basis for our next investigation. I think we're pretty close to having enough. But Gibson insists that perception is not based on sensation.
I agree
at all. And therefore, what Gibson says about I mean, he does use the term form, and it's in psychology, but it's a slightly different usage. So I don't know how if it matches up perfectly. But I think what Gibson would say, certainly what I say nowadays, is we perceive things, objectivists often say we perceive things in a form. I would say we perceive things accompanied by a form, because the actual perception is not based, it's not based on the form. It's not based on or in the form.
It's not based on the form. It
isn't.
We perceive it a certain way.
Yeah, but it's not based on, it's not, the actual information is not contained in form. That would be representationalism.
No.
It does not explain the perception. The perception is based on information and structure of light.
Yeah, but you could have the same, the canonical, the canonical example, and then we'll end, from the old MBI lectures is we feel kinetic energy of molecules as warmth, and the Martian feels it as a jiggle. Okay, two forms of perception of the same fact. We don't perceive heat on the basis of the sensation of warmth. That's the way we feel heat. The Martian feels it in a different way.
All right, here, let me just throw in one more case, and I think that's all I can do today. Facial vision is a phenomenon in which blind people will often, when they walk around in a hallway, will not walk into a wall. They come up close to the wall, and they say, many of them say, they feel a pressure on their forehead. Mm-hmm. They feel a pressure, and they don't walk into the wall. That's called facial vision. Now, it turns out if you put earplugs in these poor blind people's ears, they go smashing into the wall because it's actually echolocation.
Right.
But they don't know that. Their sensations, their form is how should I say? It's not correct. It's not the actual way. It's not the actual how of perception. The actual how of perception is by echolocation. The sensations on the forehead actually have nothing whatsoever to do with the perception. They are completely irrelevant to the perception.
Well, do they have some facial experience, or is that imagined?
They claim, some do, I don't think all, they claim they have a feeling of pressure on their forehead when they come up closer. The closer to the wall, the more
I want their names. They got to be punished.
This is what happens when you have to deal with philosophers.
Yeah.
But we scientists have to deal with philosophers. Here's what's happening. Anyway.
Next time we'll talk about Baki Rita.
Baki Rita, yeah, sure. Yeah. Baki Rita, yes. Yeah, that's good.
For next time.
Next time. Thank you very much, Harry. And thanks, Bob and Steve. And we will reassemble in 2 weeks. Some of us are going to Clubhouse. Harry, after you give yourself some nourishment, you can come over to Clubhouse too. You'd be greatly welcome if you do so. You don't have to. It's up to you. It's up to you. It's okay.
You can enlighten me. I get notifications of some Clubhouse meetings on my phone.
Yeah.
Is the phone the instrument for dealing with Clubhouse?
Yeah. You go to the Clubhouse app, open the app, and you'll see this thing. When we're on, you'll see it as an option.
And it's audio only.
It's audio only, right? And we're not recording, so you can say anything you want with that, because we're not going to record this.
Even.
Yeah, I know. Even that.
Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot,
Good.
Gentlemen. Let's go over. Shall we go over to Clubhouse, guys? Those of you who are going, and Harry, you get there if you can, when you can.
Thank you. Later.
Okay. Thanks.